Okay, I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to begin this recording. I'm trying to get over to selection. Actually, let me start again. There we go. Okay, everything is recording just great. Okay, so this is going to be the first chapter in fraud, which is ACC 230. So we're going to be able to understand the seriousness. It's very serious, how it affects our entire society. We're going to be able to define fraud. We're going to be able to understand there's different types of fraud. And I have been collecting videos where we can see different types of fraud. They may not point specifically to accounting transactions, but they still affect accounting. And I want you guys to see that and understand that there's so many different types. We're going to look at fraud committed against an organization or on behalf. We're going to understand the difference between criminal and civil fraud laws. And we're going to look at fraud fighting careers available today. Now, I'm going to warn you all that in my little accounting world, I just recently came back from a fraud conference, and I will share with you the number of people that I met that are involved in fraud fighting careers. Okay. So, we have statistics on how much fraud is occurring, whether it is increasing or decreasing, and you can look at this, and then basically they're saying it comes from different agencies, government agencies, researchers, which I'm a researcher, insurance companies, and victims of fraud. One of the best places to find any fraud statistics is ACFE.org. It is the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and they put out a global report of fraud every single year. It's their annual global report of fraud. So that is the best place to understand what's really happening in fraud. And I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit. So let's look at the seriousness. Now, the 5% has been that's been the number for years now. It rotates between 5 to 7%. And so that is your annual revenues to fraud. That's how much we lose, which amounts to about 3.5. This is in 2015. So if you go into the debt clock. There we go. If you go in there, you can look at that and say, okay, how much does that amount to right now? And we can even do that too. So you can understand that fraud constitute a huge amount of losses. So it affects how much we pay for goods and services. I recently came back from a trip with my friend, and we were in Dana Point, California, recommend it highly. And she works for Albertsons Safeway, which is soon going to be absorbed by Fry's. And she was talking about, people saying, oh, it's no big deal. They're just going to go in there and steal. No big deal. Well, the man owes it they owe it to us. And she's like, well, do you realize that when people steal and companies are losing that revenue, they in turn assume a certain percentage and they tack it on to other goods, and that cost is passed down to us, the consumers. So in effect, we're paying for that fraud. We're paying for those people going in and looting businesses in various parts of the country and walking out with tons of TVs and whatnot. That's built into their bottom line, and we're paying for it. Losses incurred from fraud reduce a firm's income, obviously. For every dollar of fraud, net income is reduced by $1. Okay, that's obvious. It takes more revenue to recover the effects of fraud, since the fraud reduces the net income. So very true. Okay, here we have what is fraud. It's a representation. There's a material point. It's false, intentionally or recklessly so, believed, acted upon by the victim to the victim's damage. Fraud is different from unintentional errors. People make mistakes, okay? It happens. Fraud is on purpose. Fraud is something that someone deliberately does. We will look at the different fraud theories that are out there, and we'll talk a little bit about sociology and how people defend or rationalize their fraud. So unintentional errors, I'll give you an unintentional errors. Okay, my same friend Tracy, we've been friends, I'm not going to say how long because it's been a long time. And I remember she was working at a pharmacy doing their accounting. And one day she went and she looked in her bank account and she noticed, I think it was either a $20,000 or $10,000 error. The bank had deposited this extra money in her bank account. And so she said something to me, oh my gosh, what do I do? And I said, well, did you contact the bank? And she said, yeah, contacted the bank, but it's still in there. They haven't taken it out. And I'm really upset. I'm really worried about this. And okay, we're accountants. We worry about things like that. Even if it's on our game, it's not, because we realize that somebody made a mistake. And that's not something we can benefit from. And so she mentioned it to her other friends who were not accounting people or business people. And they're like, oh, I would go shopping and da 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 da. But that's just stealing, because you can't benefit from a mistake. And that theoretically is what would have happened if she would have gone out on a shopping spree. That means that she's committed a criminal act and she is responsible for paying that back. People don't realize that. You hear about people like going out thinking they won the lottery when a bank accidentally puts $1 million in their account. It's not your money. You can't benefit from it. Okay, Ponzi. So the reason why they call it a Ponzi scheme is because of the first person, Charles Ponzi. Basically, it was postal coupons, currency exchange. He bragged about success. He promised all these wonderful rates of return on their investment. And basically what he was doing is he'd get an influx of money. He'd pay off the first investors and everybody's happy. And then he'd go out and get some more saying, hey, this is how much I paid, the percentage, and he'd bring in a bunch more money and pay off those. And he was basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. And he was actually profiting on it. The thing with the Ponzi scheme is you cannot continue it for long, because eventually you're going to run out of investors, and those last investors are going to be the ones that are going to suffer. They're expecting, and I've heard this before, I think somebody once mentioned to me like a 44% rate of return, and it's like no, that's not possible, especially in today's market. So I just want you guys to realize that. Okay, so a Ponzi scheme is helpful in understanding and who's involved. Well, what's happening here? Well, there's greed. Somebody wants money, and they're going to rationalize. They're going to manipulate. They're probably either a psychopath or a sociopath, and they're going to take advantage of people. They have deception. They have confidence. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. I'm going to pause the video. Okay, so when we get a little bit more in depth into the course, and I'll probably mention it numerous times because that's what I do, I will describe to you on the last day of the conference I attended, there was a gentleman, and I can't remember his name. I just know that he was the person, and Billy McFarland, there we go, that was involved in the Fry Music Festival, and what a disaster it turned out to be. And we actually had him as our final speaker, our end note speaker, discussing the whys and explaining it and all that neat stuff. So I will add a little bit of input there, and I'll mention a couple of other large name fraudsters that I have heard the feedback from them or read it, and how they explain themselves. And then I'm going to talk to you about, don't believe everything that comes out of somebody's mouth. Okay, coming down to the next one. Okay, we got that one. Okay, confidence. Again, I'm going to tell you that the confidence comes from somebody thinking that they're smarter than everybody else. And when I mention sociopath or psychopath, they're pretty much about the same type of condition. One was born and one was made. The psychopaths, with the P, okay, they actually have been shown to have brain lesions. And so those brain lesions affected the way they think. Now, a sociopath may also have brain lesions, but they're made. That means whatever happened in their environment, that's what caused these defiant behaviors they have. Now, does that mean every psychopath and sociopath is going to go out and be a criminal? No. But what it does mean is that more than likely the people who do commit these types of crimes are psychopaths and sociopaths. They have to be. They have to have that deviant personality, lack of emotions and whatnot in order to commit these types of crime. Interestingly, even though we have not been able to, at least I haven't been able to find an article that has actually accurately measured how many psychopaths and sociopaths are in business. But if you look at the characteristics of psycho or socio, you're going to find that these behaviors are actually encouraged in business. And so the theory is that there's a lot of them out there in business. So just something for you guys to think about when you can't sleep at night. So, okay. Types of fraud. There's so many different types of fraud. And I'm going to be talking about some different types of fraud. I am going to be bringing up some current examples, and sometimes it may not exactly be representative of accounting and the accounting entries, but when you look down into it, it really is affected by accounting. One such, I am going to mention the Ocean Gate and talk about the type of fraud that was committed there. And I thoroughly believe there was fraud there. And listening to various different experts talk about that case. Okay. So you can divide frauds into those that are committed against organizations and those are committed on behalf of organizations. Those that are committed against organizations are probably most likely being those frauds that are committed by an employee to steal for their behalf. Whereas committed on behalf is where somebody is manipulating something about that organization. Like, for example, Ocean Gate, they weren't telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And they were in reference to their safety. And they also were not complying with various professional standards for submarine use in their safety. And they based their reasoning on non-compliance, stating they were working in international waters and there was no international laws governing them. Okay, so I would consider that a fraud because they were warned, and I'll talk about that later. ACFE, I already mentioned that. That's Association Certified Fraud Examiners. That's the conference I went to. And it's a wonderful concert. It's a wonderful organization. If you're interested in fraud, and I'm fascinated by it, become a member. You can become a member for almost next to nothing. I think my membership was $75. And I think student memberships are $25. So, it's not that expensive. And I get it for $75 because I'm an educator. It's more expensive for those people practicing. And so we're going to divide fraud according to the victims. So here we go. We got major categories of fraud: asset misappropriations, corruption, and fraudulent financial statements. When I did my research, it was on fraudulent financial statements. And I'll tell you, quite honestly, my dissertation was titled, Is there a correlation between financial statement fraud and organizational cultures? That becomes sociology. When I went in with a bias, and my bias was that people in a market type organizational culture, which is the salespeople kind of attitude, would have more fraud. My results did not prove that. So I found that absolutely fascinating. So I'll talk more about that as we get further in. Okay. So frauds when an organization is the victim: employee embezzlement, vendor fraud, customer fraud. Normally, I'm going to tell you these two frauds here are helped along with the employee. Management fraud is when they're trying to manipulate the financial statements or the financial condition of the company in order to maintain stakeholders, shareholders, stockholders' confidence in the company, and they're trying to increase the value of the stock, which makes stockholders happy. Investment scams and other consumer frauds, victims are on, they just don't know what's going on. That would be the Fry party, the Fry musical event, and then you have some miscellaneous. Now here, management fraud, I would consider Ocean Gate right there. Enron would be right here. So we will get into a whole lot more detail as the semester goes forward. Okay. So here's types of fraud. You got employee embezzlement, vendor fraud, customer fraud, management fraud. I'm sure we've all heard of the people who go and change around price tags, trying to buy some goods that, let's say, they cost $50, and then they go and switch the price tag to only $5. That happens all the time, and so you've got to always be on your lookout. Vendor fraud, that's somebody we sell to. They provide lower quality or fewer goods than agreed upon. That's really, you hear about these, especially with larger organizations where these vendors will send them substandard products and say, well, in here it says this, this, and this, and they didn't get what they were promised. And we'll look into that. Okay. There's investment scams, and those are, our Ponzi scams and other different types of investment scams like the Fry Music Festival. And then they have other miscellaneous, which, just is where we throw all the ones we can't define. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause the video. I know you're going, wait, she didn't pause it from before, but I am going to pause it. Okay, so right here, they're talking about employee embezzlement, occupational fraud, most common. In fact, it's quite interesting, is that the majority of fraud that's committed is actually employee fraud. I can't remember, and we'll look at the ACFE global report of the nations to determine what the new annual loss is per employee embezzlement, but it used to be around 100 and some thousand. You'll find the most number of incidents under occupational fraud, but this is going to be really, really kind of cool, is that when you're looking at the most damaging fraud, that's not just costing the company dollars, when you're looking at it's costing society, that comes from your financial statement fraud, and that's in the millions. And that's the most destructive type of fraud. Anyhow, so you can see in here, we've got just stealing cash, stealing assets. I've seen both. Supplies, seen customers do it, whatnot. Seeing people going in and taking goods, bribes and kickbacks. That's also a big one right there. I may go with the higher, or I may tell my buddy that works over for ABC, hey, if you send us all this paper, charge us this. And even though your company only, let's say $3 a ream, even though your company only charges $1.50, and between the two of us, we'll split the difference. And so that ABC employee will get 75 cents and I'll get 75 cents. That's what you would consider a kickback. Examples, they have CVC construction and Big D advertising. And so let's go ahead and see what those are. I have lost my mouse has decided not to be happy with me. Vendor, acting alone, or sometimes there's some type of collusion. I just mentioned that. Overcharge for purchased goods, the inferior goods, and even not even shipping the goods. Right here, this has got to be in a case where an employee is acting in collusion with the vendor. There's a Department of Defense case. Types of customer frauds. Customers don't pay, they pay too little, they get something for nothing, they deceive organizations into giving them something that they should not. There's all kinds of those where supposedly not-for-profit, nonprofit entities go in and say, hey, we're raising money for this, this, and this, and when in fact they don't even exist, they're just making things up. Okay. Management fraud, they have the financial statement fraud. Top management deceptively misstates financial statements. This is the biggest one. This is where you're going to have the biggest losses. Enron. What happened with Enron is they were taking their liabilities and they were considering them off book. Now, the SEC, FASB, GASB have come in and regulated those off book categories quite a bit. And so now you never hear about anybody reporting off book. But that's what they were doing. So when you look at their financial statement, there's very little liabilities listed there. And so you think they're really performing well. Well, in reality, they owed a bunch of money. So when the proverbial, it's the fan, a lot of your executive management team dumped their stocks, and their stocks showed that they were performing at an immense, massive level. And they dumped their stock in the market before everything could be released. That's called insider trading. And they ended up, because they did the financial statement fraud and then they did the insider trading, they ended up going to prison. I think somebody actually committed suicide, which is awful. But there was a lot of cases there involving actual criminal, what's the word I want to use? I'm having a COVID brain reading here. Lots of criminal, not persecutions. Anyhow, they got tried criminally and it was found true. And then they also got tried civilly. Okay. WorldCom again, what they were doing is they still had their original family up in the management positions. And so what they were doing is they were giving themselves loans and then writing those loans off. Well, who wants to know about that? Well, I want to know that all these millions of dollars have been taken out of the company, and we've dismissed these liabilities that somebody's going to pay, or I'm sorry, receivables that somebody's going to pay us back. And then in turn, when they credit that receivable, they got a debited expense or some type, and it makes the company look bad, and the daughter and the son are all stealing money and the dad's stealing money, and it just it was just awful. Well, who else wants to know they got a bunch of money? And that would be the IRS. They didn't report that on their taxes. And Sunbeam, I'm not familiar with, but I could probably imagine it had something to do with inflating their assets. Okay, so I love the fact that, well, I don't love it, but I love how they're talking about other consumer frauds, and they start mentioning the telemarketing, the Nigerian, the identity theft, advanced fee scams, redemption, straw man, a bond fraud, letter of credit fraud, internet fraud. And I love the fact that many grocery stores or merchandising companies have a sign posted about do not send money to people you don't know. And every once in a while you hear about it in Yuma, especially since we're so close to the border, about people getting phone calls about the one of their family is being held for ransom, or they're stuck in some country and they're trying to get out. Well, what happens quite a few times is that that family member usually is sitting there, but some people actually fall for it, and they're, they think, oh my gosh, my grandchild is, is being hurt or something, I gotta go save them. And so then they send these people money, and it never stops. The lotteries send us this much money so we can do all the administrative fees, and then we'll send you your $4 million. Well, no, that's not what happens. I will tell you one that keeps showing up in my junk mail every couple of years, and it's somebody wanting Bitcoin from me. And so what it is they send me a message saying that they have hacked my computer, and I do all these really bad things on the computer, and they've been watching me and they've been recording me at work. So I know that I'm not, and I know that I don't. So I'm not too worried about it, but they say send so much in Bitcoin or else we're going to tell all your colleagues and everybody that you've been watching, basically it's watching porn and what you do when you watch porn. And I just crack up, but there's all kinds of them out there. Oh, I'm going to come back real fast. I also get the ones from Dr. Core. It's not from Dr. Core. That is asking me, saying, hey, I need your help real fast. I need to pay this bill and I don't have time to get to it. So can you go to the store and go buy 5 Visa cards and put $50 on them and then send them over here? Well, Dr. Core would, 1, never ask me to do that, and 2, knows a whole lot better. It's not Dr. Core, it's just somebody pretending to be, so they can get you to sneak, they can sneak cash out of your pocket because they're assuming you're going to run down to go help Dr. Core. But we've been trained not to believe that. Okay. Criminal and civil prosecution. Criminal is, when you have committed a criminal law, which is a violation against some type of law, and it's an offense of they say it's an offense of a public nature. Well, I think it's an offense against another person that is, what's the word I want to use? Somebody purposefully does it, and they know they're doing it, and they know what they're doing is wrong, but they still do it. A civil law is when you do have a number of civil laws, and you go after somebody in a civil court, and it has to do with your own personal private rights versus the public as a whole. So here we go. Okay, so here are some different things. There's bribery, anti-kickback, mail fraud. Those are a couple of them right there that they talk about. One of the things that I want to mention is that if you're taking my government class, I'm going to be talking about bribery and some of the forms that we have to sign stating we're not going to do this when we receive federal or state funding. So just just some thoughts for you. Bank fraud, racketeer, influenced and corruptions. That's a RICO. That's your, that's your. I'm trying to remember some of the gangs. The Irish mafia, the New York mafia, the Italian mafia, so on and so forth. Those are where you're going to find that. Computer fraud, of course. Securities fraud. That's a big one. This is where you're talking about when you are looking at, something personal about the company that nobody else does, and you act on it, and it's basically for your advantage. And that if you don't act on it now, you're going to end up losing money. And so that's called insider trading. Martha Stewart was convicted of that. And don't get me started on that, because I think I just shake my head. Okay, Foreign Corruption Practices Act, bribery, foreign officials. I've heard some people coming back from the military. I don't quite know if this is true or not. I've never had anybody confirm this, nor am I going to ask. But I've heard that sometimes to get around in places in the Middle East, you would have to give tribal people, let's say the leaders, cash, a bribe in order to pass through safely. I don't know. I can see it happening. I'm just not going to say anything and confirm it. Tax evasion, not paying your taxes, not reporting all your income. Okay, so you can see the criminal case and the consequences. Criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, here's the difference between a criminal and civil. And then a civil case is the preponderance of evidence. So beyond a reasonable doubt, and then more likely than not is basically what that means. So you don't necessarily have to have 12 people. You don't have to have a jury on either one. You can just hear it before a judge and let the judge make the decision. Initiation, you have to have a grand jury indict. Okay, just because you are indicted doesn't mean you're guilty. What it means is there's enough evidence to take you to trial. So I've seen, and I don't care which side you're on, it's not my business. It's not your business what side I'm on. We'll just all kind of think about that. But I've seen a lot of people like go, yay, Donald Trump's been indicted. Well, yeah, that doesn't mean anything. He has to be tried and be found beyond a reasonable doubt. That means if anybody has any doubt that that's what happened, they can be found not guilty. Okay, so the burden of proof is much more difficult to prove in a criminal case than in a civil case. So don't let that whole everybody getting on the bandwagon screaming, yay, startle you. You got to come back to the, what does this mean? And think, okay, well, let's see how this plays out. And that's exactly what we're going to see play out. This has to be unanimous verdict with your criminal case. You can only do one claim at a time. Parties can, in a civil case, stipulate to less than a unanimous, and you can throw a couple of claims in there in one action. Think Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. I actually have a video that I'm going to show you in reference to that. I have a video, I clipped it, of the actual certified fraud examiner. Actually, I think he was a forensic accountant that was testifying on behalf of Johnny Depp. So I found it interesting. That's what I do. Okay. How to be a fraud, what do they want to say? Fighting professional. You can do it a couple different ways. The best way is to, one, get an education, then go sit for your certified fraud examiner or your CPA and test for it. And then you become one, and then you got to keep up with your continuing education and whatnot. You have to be a certified public accountant in order to become a certified forensic accountant. You do not have to be a CPA to become a certified fraud examiner. A different type of professional accreditation. You need to have logic, you need to have investigative skills, you need to understand quite a bit of information. You need to understand sociology, you need to know how to interview. There's so many things. When I went to my conference, I know I'm rocking back and forth in my chair. When I went to my conference, there were 30 choices of different types of seminars I could have gone to. I chose the ones that had to do with education, and so I can gain more knowledge in that area than learning how to interview clients, because I'm not going to go interview clients. I'm going to be talking to students and teaching you. So I wanted those that I could use in my classroom. So you have to know quite a bit. I don't necessarily think you need the ability to write and speak in a foreign language. You could always have an interpreter there. You got to be really careful because everybody's talking about Chat GPT. Be real careful. I heard that there was a couple of attorneys that decided to defend their entire case using Chat GPT responses, and it ended up that they gave fraudulent information. So just some things. You've got to have a lot of, law enforcement, those skills. You've got to have investigative skills. You've got to understand accounting, and you've got to have your critical thinking skills. Okay, certified fraud examiners. I already mentioned it, and I'm going to take you over to that website in just a little bit, but this is what you have to do. Now, I can, if I want to, which I don't because I want to teach, but I am a member of the ACFE. To become a CFE, I have to go take a test. I have to be in good standing, which means I pay my bills. I have to have you have to have at least a bachelor's degree with so many credits in different areas. And I have to meet the professional requirements, which means I sit under another CFE to make sure, so I'd have practice doing it. Moral character, pass the examination, and agree to abide by the code of ethics. You have to have a minimum of a bachelor's. No specific field of study is required. However, you're going to have some credits in certain areas. They do have these study tests that you can go in and you purchase. They're about $1,000. They may be more now. Gleam does it, GLEIM, and they're basically study material, so it can help you pass the exam. And there is the experience that you need in order to sit for a CFE. The exam format, hang on just a moment. Okay, so the format, you have 4 sections. You got fraud prevention and deterrence, you got financial transactions and schemes, investigation, and the law. All of these are very detailed, and you have to know your subject matter, okay? Because it's not easy. And it's a great accomplishment when you pass your CFE examination. There's 4 sections, each has 125 questions. It's online. You have to sit one sitting, complete it all. And you have to complete all 4 sections in 30 days, or complete each section in one sitting. Okay. Whoops. Fraud relating careers. Oh my gosh. You can see right here, I met people from the Secret Service. I've met people that are from the FBI, specific to the ones that come in when you guys apply to become a border patrol or you apply to work for the government. They come in and talk to me. I've met people from there that go to these fraud conferences and are involved in it. I've met a number of people from different state government. I've met a number of fraud practitioners that come in and they're doing that investigative fraud. They're investigating fraud. I've met certified fraud examiners, met people from the CIA, from the FBI. In fact, we had this man down from the FBI. His last duty station was in Phoenix. It happened that his niece was in my class, he actually worked on the Enron case. So he was one of the certified forensic accountants that worked on Enron. So there's so many different people that come together in these fraud related careers. In fact, I would say it's one of the biggest growing careers for accounting, because it's really coming to the center stage saying, hey, we need to protect ourselves against this craziness. So, and there's all kinds of different types of employers. What I found a couple of people who were educators into academics or academia, like me at the fraud conference. However, there were so many more people that were working for the government and law enforcement. That I think was the biggest portion of people coming in. I met people from all over the world, which surprisingly from even Nigeria. So people all over the world. Fascinating people. I met this one woman, and I'm going to try to see if I can get a hold of some of her study materials. She creates, when she's doing training, she creates fraud scenarios. And then you have to go in and you'd have to try to figure out how to investigate it and how you're going to start, and what in this area, what calls to you and says, hey, this could be fraud. So it's absolutely fascinating. And I think this is the last slide. It is. So I'm going to go ahead and escape. And I'm going to come over here and come up. Well, I was watching Judge Judy. See, I listen to all kinds of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to the ACFE. You can see, oh, it's calm, not. I thought it was org. Okay, who are you, dude? Let's see. I'm trying to see if I can find some pictures of the people I met. There was this one guy I met, and I have this book, and it talks about how to tell if somebody's lying. These are different events they have going on, but there's more than 90,000 members. Okay. Let's see. Fact Finder, Fraud Magazine, membership. Oh, okay. Okay, so this is the one that talks about that report I mentioned. Okay, come on. Okay, so here's basically some of the benchmarks. A typical fraud case lasts 12 months before detection, median loss of 117,000. Now, when you're looking at your financial statement fraud, you're looking at millions. So you can see which industries here have the largest amount of fraud losses. Interesting. Transportation and warehousing. That's probably assets. Okay, meaning either your inventory or basically your inventory assets, people stealing them. Okay, half of all reported frauds occurred in these 4 departments. And so you can kind of see, look at that. Upper management. Okay, and so I can download this, and it gives me all kinds of really cool information. And of course, there's charts and graphs, and I'll go into it further into with the semester. I'll be pulling this up. I'll be looking at it. I may be asking you to look at it. So remember how I found that. And then I'm going to come back all the way over here. And let me see if I can find events calendar. So I went to conference. Let me see if they have the one. That's Canada. Oh, I was hoping they had the ones from before. I can get to it, but I don't think I can get into it without signing in, and I'm not going to do that. But anyhow, this is really cool. I will be sharing some of the things that I do have that I've received from them. I will be pulling it out. Okay, here we go. Let me see. Oh, I want to know packages. I want to see how much the I can't find it right now, but you can. You can find in here in the membership, it'll tell you which ones and how much it cost you. I'm part of this. Okay. Group membership and I join. I want to find the price. Here we go. I'm an educator, student membership. Yes, this is where I want to find. Okay, how much does it cost? Don't you love this? Oh, goodness. How can I qualify for a student? Doesn't it tell you? I guess it's not going to tell me. Another thing I do want to point out, they do have scholarships. Okay. They have a conference internship. You can be with a chapter, world-class training. Okay. So you can go in and I think you get a discount on your CFE examination. So anyhow, there is my first video for the class and you're going to love it. I know you are. Everybody does. So I look forward to seeing you for chapter 2.